the channel. Today we're going to cover everything about BOKKEN basics. This is going to be a three-part series. In the first part we're going to talk about safety of the BOKKEN and also a Shomen cut or a straight cut. And in video 2 we'll go over a yokomen cut or a slicing from the side type of cut. And then finally the last video is going to be the ski. So as why you would ski, why you would thrust as opposed to an overhead cut. So first what I'm going to do is cover the difference between different types of BOKKEN and when you would want one over the other. This is the type of BOKKEN that I suggest a beginner start with, and a number of reasons for that. One is it has a tsuba on there so that you can get used to putting your hand in the right position, and this is a reminder of where that hand goes. And if you don't have this in place, then you tend to creep up and you're grabbing the blade after a while. So that's why I suggest starting with a BOKKEN that has a tsuba on it. And just to get started with a BOKKEN, just a basic BOKKEN, I suggest the one in the above link. This type of BOKKEN I suggest starting out with, especially if you're starting to practice Aikido or Aikido. I think this is a better one, a better choice. And notice it has a good profile, so it looks just like a sword. Okay, this is another style of BOKKEN that is more for traditional or koru styles. Notice it doesn't have, it's not as well shaped as the other one, and it doesn't have any distinguishing features that you can know that this is where the tsuba would be. So you just kind of have to get an understanding of that from doing lots of sword work. So I suggest starting with this if you're going to do a koru style, whereas this one is going to be more for Aikido and Iaido and more of a beginner to start out with. Now, what I typically do is I call this a BOKKEN and I call this a BOKKTO. Traditionally, you can call either one either name, but just for the sake of this video, I generally call this a BOKKEN for Aikido and Iaido, and this is a BOKKTO. The principles I'm going to cover today, I'm going to more gear it towards Aikido, Iaido, and not so much towards Kenjutsu, because that's a little different in how you would use this weapon. What I want to do is start out with some safety items, because these things can be very dangerous. I know about 20 years ago I saw a guy almost lose his eye. He had a BOKKTO thrust right into his eye socket, pushed his eye back, and he had to have 4 surgeries. So I'm really adamant about safety, so we're going to go over that first. First thing I want to point out is if a BOKKEN has been abused, you'll see the fibers of the wood pop up on top of it, and if you run your hand across that, you'll get splinters in there. So always inspect for these fibers to come up, and then you can sand them down or plane it down as they come up, and that's another reason why you shouldn't abuse your weapons. Now the other safety point is I have a lot of students that'll take these things home and they'll start swinging around in their kitchen or living room, and they're bashing chandeliers and hitting all sorts of stuff. So I highly suggest do not start wielding this around in your house. Only do it at the dojo or out in the backyard. Okay, so last I want to go over safety when you're working with a partner. And the one thing you want to do is learn how to control this thing. So a lot of this basic video is going to be done on control. But one of the things is if I'm swinging the sword towards his head, I want to stop above the head or below. Like if I'm thrusting to the throat, I want to thrust here and not where the throat level. So I want to stay away from this zone just so that I don't injure him. So you'll see a lot of the cuts will stop up here or stop down here. Now what I'm going to do is teach you a basic BOKKEN strike or BOKKEN cut. And it's called Shomen. It's when the blade goes straight down from the top to the bottom. It goes perfectly straight. What I'm going to distinguish between beginner and advanced is this. Beginner is just using your arms to move the weapon, and advanced is when you move your whole body to move the weapon. So we're going to focus on just the beginning where you're just moving the weapon with your arms. Okay, so first thing is grab the BOKKEN with your right hand up at the top near the tsuba. The tsuba is there, so if you thrust, your hand doesn't slide onto the blade, so it's to keep your hand from moving forward. But it also gives you a good indication of where your hand should be. So the top hand goes there, wrap your fingers around, grab about where the middle finger is, wrap your thumb around there, and then use your bottom hand at the bottom. And I wrap it around where my pinky is, just at the base of the sword. So now let's go over a basic cut. So basic cut, you've got to lift it up over your head and then cut down. So the first thing to do is when you lift, you're going to lift and push your elbows up, and that pushes the weapon up above your head. Okay, in just an arcing motion. So the first thing, before you start cutting with a sword, the first thing you have to understand is the V pattern of the sword. And what I'm talking about is you have the back of the sword, or that's called the mune. That's part you can actually touch with your hand because it's not sharp. It's on purposely not sharp. It's the back. And then you have the sharp part that's actually a V. So if you look down the sword, you can see there's this V coming up from there and coming down. So if I flip it over, I've got this V. And when you're cutting, you want to cut in perfect relationship of that V. So if I'm cutting down, I don't want to cut like this or like this. I want to cut perfectly down the center. Or if I'm cutting from the side, I want to cut perfectly from the left, perfectly from the right. So that V is always traveling in perfect direction of which way the sword is moving. So once you get the bokken over your head, now it's time to cut. And to keep a cut going straight, the key is as I push forward, I am going to squeeze my hands together and let my elbows kind of come together in this fashion as I'm squeezing and pushing forward. So I'm pushing forward and pushing out, and then its natural gravity will bring it down. So I suggest when you begin, start from overhead and then push out and then let gravity take it down. Now the next thing is how to stop the weapon, because the tendency is to pull down and pull up to stop it. So you want to get to where you just extend out and it stops. Extend out, and by pushing forward it stops. So only do this as fast as you can do it naturally, and speed up as you get more control and as you can stop the tip of the weapon exactly where you want it to stop. Don't move any fast. Don't start swinging it as hard as you can. Only swing as fast as you have control of stopping the tip right when it gets to the bottom. Okay, there's two types of cuts that I want you to be aware of. One is mainly for Aikido type of cutting action, and one is more for Aikido, or an Aikido principle. So if you want to actually cut with the sword with Aikido, from this position you'll want to extend like you're extending more up and then forward and then let it travel down. So you're getting more of an arc that goes up. And how you can tell that is as I'm extending, I'm trying to get the end of it, or as the weapon is in a straight line, it will point to my center all the way down to the bottom. See, it points right at my center. So as it breaks up a little higher, because I'm extending out, it points to my center and then it goes down. Now I'm going to show you a cut that's more indicative of Aikido, which has a different purpose. So now, if I'm up in my cut like this, and I'm going to pull down, because I'm doing more of a striking down here than a cutting out there. So I'm pulling more down, and then it breaks over at the end, so it comes down. See, notice it's pointing almost at the ground, and then it breaks over at the end point, so my tip is the last thing to break over. Okay, now what I want to do is demonstrate the Aikido, or more of an Aikido way to do a cut with the bokken. So again, we're going to up above the head, either here or here, and then we're going to move forward, but pulling more down than out. Now, one final thing I'll say is when the sword is above your head, there's many different ways that people will use this. Some will bring it all the way back behind them, almost where it's touching. This is more for like Aikido, is it behind, and then it's a big cut, and it teaches getting that arc up there. So they start behind them. Some people will thrust up above their head and then move forward. And some people will put it right on their head so that the space between your hands will touch the head, and then you cut out from that position. Whichever position you happen to start from, the key is not to telegraph that you're moving forward. So if I start from this position, I'm going to come forward and the tip will not dip and then go forward, because you don't want to let your opponent or your enemy know that you're attacking them. So here, if you dip down and then move forward, that's an excess motion that's not needed, and it tips off the other guy that you're cutting at them. So the first exercise you want to do to learn your distance is have a partner hold a bokken or a stick or anything. And what you're going to do is you're going to come down to the weapon and try not to hit it real hard as you're coming down. You're not going to bang into it like that. You're going to come forward and stop right when you get there to learn that control. Okay, once you get pretty proficient at stopping right at the bokken when it's not moving, then you can have your partner slowly move it up and down. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to swing at the stick and try to stop at each level so that you're basically swinging at a moving target and stopping right before the target. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to swing at that moving stick and try to stop right where that stick is. Okay, once you get control of this weapon, then you can practice stopping right on the person's skin. So you might have to start out slow. So you're going to start out slow, where you're just stopping, swinging and stopping at that point of impact, so that you learn control where you're not hitting the other person, just tapping them. I hope these basic principles of how to use a bokken or a bokto will help you in either studying Aikido, Kenjutsu, or Kendo. If you like these videos, go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notifications so you'll know when the next video comes out. If you like the series, this 3-part series on how to use a bokto or a bokken, then I highly suggest moving on to something more advanced and moving on to the katana videos. The first one is basic safety of a katana and how to draw the sword. And then the next series of 4 is a series of 4 on how to cut with a katana, which is a little more advanced. Okay, this concludes part 1 of how to use a bokken or a bokto, where we looked at the straight cut. Then if you want to move to the yokomen or the side cut, I highly suggest you click on the link above.